So I guess we're going to discuss my process and how I kind of came into metalwork, and it's sort of a backwards process from the digital world and into fabrication. So these are pieces that I've done at Green Lake Jewelry. I'm now in Seattle, and I'm working for Jim at Green Lake. And this kind of gives you a broad spectrum of some of the stuff that we're doing. I sort of came into the jewelry world through skull rings, which is in its own right kind of hysterical. This is one of the pieces I sort of got well known for, these kind of sort of high-end skull rings. I was the lead sculptor on the first Pirates of the Caribbean, and I made a bunch of skull rings. And afterwards, everyone's like, oh, make skull rings, make skull rings. And, well, I had a real job. I was like, no, I'm not making skull rings. And through a bizarre set of circumstances, I wound up in Wisconsin and had nothing to do. And I was like, hey, I can make skull rings. And here we go, skull rings. For a while, we got pretty well known in Japan. I had a number of shops in Japan that carried my stuff. We were on the cover of the Rolling Stone in Japan. Fudge is a fashion magazine in Japan. We were listed in France, here. And then the economy crashed. And, well, people were not real excited about dumping $600 for skull rings in Japan when the economy bottomed out. And so I continued making skull rings and went through a number of different symposiums and stuff, and that's where I met Jim. And Jim and I became friends, and finally Jim was looking at pieces and was like, well, why don't you have any of these made? And I'm like, well, because I don't know anything about setting stones, and I'm just making stuff up. And like a month or two later, he was like, well, you want to come work in Seattle? And I was in Wisconsin. Okay, Wisconsin, Seattle. Yeah. Moved to Seattle. So here is the Seattle move. So I started going to CalArts, California Institute of the Arts. These are sketches of it. It was an amalgamation of the Los Angeles Music Conservatory and Chouinard Art School. They joined in 1969, and this is what the campus was supposed to look like downtown. Disney stopped the funding for the downtown campus when they visited the school, and it had a swimming pool, and he and Mrs. Disney walked by, and there were nude people in the swimming pool. They were so offended, they left, and they lost the funding for downtown and moved to shiny Valencia, 30 minutes north, and this is what the campus turned into. CalArts was a pretty amazing place to start as an artist. It's one of the most exciting peer groups on the planet. It's really selective to get in. Last year, it was elected the best art school in the world. And this really was the place that was the anvil for forming my visions. It was insanely brutal. The people were mean. And so you had to justify everything you did. And it was exciting because my peer group were really the people who inspired me. And this is one of my peers. This is Guillermo Gomez-Pina. He's a performance artist, and he won the MacArthur Genius Award. Mark Andrews was my roommate. He won many awards for Iron Giant, and he just did a film called Brave. He works at Pixar now. Pete Docter was one of my suite mates. He is one of the three guys the top three guys at Pixar now. Tom McGrath was another suite mate, and he just directed Megamind. I wound up spending a lot of time in the animation school. My mentor sort of dragged me out of the theater school and said, no, you're just going to be my TA. So for a year and a half, I was doing one TA ship for 14 credits. So we sat around and talked, but the peer group was incredibly talented. So if you didn't keep up, you didn't keep up, and it was ugly. Tim Burton, I've met Tim through school. I've worked on a number of his films. He was actually a pretty active participant at CalArts. Art history and how I got my start. Well, we went through a little bit of the start, but we're going to go back a little farther. And then we have the ZBrush mechanics of mechanical tools and organic lines. Taking sculpture and bringing it into the digital realm, which makes it now repeatable and being able to save, like you can develop libraries of parts, and it's wonderful. And now, where one of the kind works is headed, the industry. Art history. So I grew up, my grandmother had an amazing collection of Art Nouveau jewelry and Lalique jewelry. And so some of the things that I remember when I was a really young child were her jewelry pieces, and they were actually the things that inspired me to become a sculptor. And yeah, what can you say? You know, it's incredible. Well, then Star Wars came out, and then Alien came out. And I remember being a kid and looking at Geiger's drawings in Omni magazine after the film came out. And it tied a lot to the Nouveau shapes and lines that I'd kind of grown up with, but it was obviously modernized and creepy. And that was really sort of a driving factor in the objects that I made. I later went on, and this was for Alien 4, went on to work with Geiger and sculpt alien costumes. And I did pre-production work on Syl, which is the species monster. I did quite a bit of work with Geiger. And this is, okay, we're going into Hollywood. So basically I spent 18 years in Hollywood, 18 and a half years in Hollywood as a sculptor. And our union, we did large scenic elements, and we did costumes, we did little itty-bitty props, we sculpted rings. So this was sort of like grad school. I went to grad school for a short period of time, left the East Coast, it was horrifying, and came back to Hollywood. And this really was an education ground, because where else do you get, you know, $3.5 to $9 million budget to make stuff up? This is actually for Caesar's Palace in Vegas. We did a lot of stuff for casinos. You might remember the Warner Brothers stores and things like that. We did a lot of visual merchandising stuff. I worked and did mannequins and you name it, we made it. I think this was for, it was a French or Italian, I can't remember the name, sorry. But this is foam. So we sculpted in foam, clay, and you'll see styrene foam. This polyurethane, white styrene. This is sort of fancy floral foam. You know, the foam you get, like the green foam, that is the same process that this stuff's made out of. That was for Batman, the one on the end, and this was for the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that was, the devil was in it. I don't remember what it was called. Because we're in the CG world, people don't realize that the large scenic elements of these films were actually constructed. Like on Batman, we'd build entire city blocks full scale with large architectural elements like this, and they'd shoot them. This is an example of styrene foam. So we'd sculpt in the white bead foam, they'd hard coat it, and this was for a commercial about saving whales. This is the process for creature stuff. This is, on the end, is a maquette. It was about so tall. And then you sculpt it in clay. They make silicone molds of it. And then use a flexible urethane foam to make the actual costume parts. And so, sort of the process of other things. Now, this shows you the process for the monumental scale stuff. This was for, it's a shopping center in LA, or it's called Citadel, it's outlet mall, but they make a lot of money. So this is the scale maquette, and it was carved in foam off of the drawings. You then sculpt it full scale, and this is 2-pound foam, so it's 2 pounds per square foot. The yellow that you just saw was 4 pounds, so it's more dense, so you can do smaller details in it. They then made a mold of it, cast them in fiberglass, and they stand on top of, yes, the Citadel outlet malls. This is actually a fiberglass of the Batmobile. I tried to find the pictures of it in Chavant, and I couldn't find them, but this was sculpted in clay. They had a CNC router that routed the base shape. And then we sculpted the frame, everything you see in gray here, in Chavant automotive styling clay. They then made silicone molds of it, cast them in fiberglass, and when it's painted, you kind of get the Batmobile. And I worked on 3 versions of this car for 3 different films, and it's always funny to see how the next car designer is going to try to figure out how to make something that looks exactly like this, only different. Going down in scale some and turning to metalwork. This is the prototype for the wall plaque that Nike gave to all of the basketball players on the first Dream Team. Well, the China Olympics? One of the Olympics, I can't even remember. It has to be that one. And so it was themed. This is actually the resins. These are the direct rapid prototypes that we then sent to have approved. But they cast it in metals, and so it was a gold medal and a tarnished silver medal, and obviously they plaqued it out. And so this is the beginnings of me working in ZBrush. So everything I did before was all hand-carved sculpting, and then my friend introduced me to ZBrush, and it was fantastic, but there was no way to get it out of the computer. The files were so big. I'm going to throw polygons out there, but I think maybe if you don't understand polygons, you'll understand the numbers at least. Basically, ZBrush, when I sculpt in ZBrush, I work in anywhere between 9 and 20 million polygons. Well, to get a rapid prototyping machine to look at something, understand it, and not just eat itself when you turn it on, is about 150 to 200,000 polygons. So if you think about the geometry it takes to create, the more mesh you get, the more detail you get, well, you then have to drag that entire mesh away and try to get it down. Well, at this point in ZBrush's history, they didn't have that. And it was never really intended as a program to generate objects. It was a film program. I mean, like on Pirates of the Caribbean, like Davy Jones and all those organic sculptural elements were all done in ZBrush. They're rigged, they're modeled in Maya, and they go. And I got it from my friend, and I was like, oh, this is heaven. This is sculpting in the computer. And I tried to figure out how to make this thing work. And it took about a year. I used like 6 different programs, dragged the things out, and I wish there was a picture, a good picture of this, because the surface detail on this is like rasterized. There are steps that they had to sand out. And then if you could look at that size and then look at the detail in this, in 3 years, it's mind-numbing how far technology has come. So I had basically created this path in ZBrush. I started making jewelry. I posted it on the ZBrush forum, and I got all these people going, oh, that's an amazing rendering. And I'm like, well, no, that's silver. And the next day, I had 4 people call me. One was Gentle Giant, which is a production company in Los Angeles, ZBrush, and like 3 people from ZBrush, and they were like, what do you mean you made this? Like, how did you do it? And I went through the whole thing, and we then started talking about how to incorporate decimation algorithms into ZBrush. And this is one of the pieces that I produced. It's a squid pendant. I have a thing for cephalopods, and if I'm not mistaken, the next picture is, the model. To get these pieces to produce, they had to have a decimation program, and the decimation is where you remove the geometry from the model. And
you make it small.
Yes, geometrically smaller. And so old decimation, if you think of a polygon as a square, think of 1 divided in 4. Well, old decimation usually just yanked the 4 out, and now you had 1 square. Well, the problem with that is, well, here we don't need a lot of geometry. Here you need a whole lot of geometry to get around it. So there are algorithms that I started doing research, and the algorithms are based on light reflection algorithms. I'm a math idiot. I'm sorry, I have nothing to explain to you. But I saw my old professor's name on the white paper about light reflection. And so I'm calling him, and he's like, dude, you can't add. You're talking about like some high-end, like mind-bending science here. I'm like, I'm trying to sculpt. And he's like, what? He then looked at the program, sent me the algorithm. I sent it to ZBrush, and they've turned it into one of the most amazing decimation programs there is. They give it to you free. They're wonderful people. And so now you can actually produce these. I don't have this with me, unfortunately. I use a program called Modo, which is a basic modeling program. But you have a lot of control over your base geometry. And the key to ZBrush and a lot of these other programs is when you go into the program, you want as little geometry as you can possibly have, because you subdivide it in that program and it divides it better. You get more subtools, and the more subtools you have, you can go back and forth when you're sculpting. It just makes it a lot better. So I was using a program called Matrix, and Matrix generates really bad OBJ geometry. Well, now it's much better, actually. But when I was doing it, you could not get anything out of Matrix and into ZBrush. And I put the call on ZBrush for him, and I was like, how does this happen? And Rick Baker, who's a very famous monster maker, was like, go buy Modo, you idiot. And so Modo is, and if you were looking at the video earlier, and there's a video at the end of this, you'll see the construction of one of these rings, and it starts from the ground level and goes out, and it's that base geometry program that I use to develop the, well, base geometry. These are ZBrush models of some of the parts that I'm creating at Green Lake right now. We're trying to develop a line that is kind of a modern Art Nouveau or Art Nouveau weighted lines. It's, you know, it's my Geiger and Nouveau blended into this, and this is what you get. And I have some of these with us here. And so the challenge right now is detail. The rapid prototyping machines are great. They're coming along. They're moving. Oh, and here's a picture of the piece. And you can sort of see where, you know, you just, you know, we lose definition, we lose some of those, because it's going through this process of being cast, being finished, so I put, my major drama is I put really fine little lines on things that go away the first time you look at it with a green polishing wheel. And so that's the fight that I'm going through right now. Once again, you can see these little ridges that are like 0.5 millimeter. And luckily, yeah, okay, yes, they wish they were 0.5 millimeter. Luckily, I've been blessed to work at Green Lake Jewelry, where they have these amazingly talented people, like this one and that one, who put all the detail back in. And so they all, like your mill grain, and a lot of it is re-engraved back into the pieces now. And they love me for it. Yeah. I'm really trying to get out of these. There are traditional motifs and shapes that are really exciting, but trying to visualize them differently so the parts that construct the overall silhouettes are different. I have a thing about changing planes and things going inside it. Like I said, it's sort of octopus nouveau, cephalopod nouveau. Milling and growing. This was my milling machine. And all the towels are because I'm really, really lazy and I don't like to clean my machine. So you just put towels on it and but the milling technology, this was when I first moved to Wisconsin. I left Hollywood and I moved to Wisconsin because of a family death. And my mom was pretty tore up about it, and I went back for the funeral and I was like, okay, I'll just move here. And I didn't really think about the repercussions of moving to northwest Wisconsin. You know, I moved from 14 million to a town of under 2,000 where it got -60 wind chill factor. I was in shock, needless to say, and I had to do something. So I was like, oh, I'll start making jewelry. And this is my humble beginning. I bought a mill, I bought Matrix, and I was like, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I can sit down and teach myself how to use these things. And I really like milling. I think the detail you get out of it is actually wonderful. I mean, it obviously has its restrictions in the other thing that I like, planes going one, that doesn't work. But I tried for years. And so this is my mill. And now, you know, the detail is really fabulous. You know, I'm not a magic miller. I pushed go. It wasn't like everyone was like really impressed with my waxes. And then I realized that they were all fabricators. So they're generating all these. I generated like 400 waxes on my machine, and I do 18-hour, 20-hour mills. And well, it didn't bother me because I was making one of them. You know, so I discovered that everyone was really impressed with my milling just because I took the time to do it. And now I work at Green Lake, and look, they're very clean, shiny mills. No towels. And Green Lake is really great because we really focus on, like, the technology is a very integral part of the creation process. And it's not a place that hides it. So I think it's fascinating how the client, when you first come in, are faced with the fact that technology and, I mean, the shop is beautiful. So you have this overall aesthetic with a technology underpinning. And it's interesting. I think it opens up the mind of a client before they even sit down to think about it. They're looking, you're already, this is the first thing you see as you walk in the door, and your brain has already started thinking about the processes that create these pieces. And when you sit down to do a custom piece with a designer, your brain is already thinking process. I think it's a very clever idea. Now this is an EnvisionTEC growing machine. This is what we use at Green Lake. I have samples of the pieces here so you can kind of see the differences in blown wax, EnvisionTEC grown, and then EnvisionTEC grown with a different material. There's a substance called photosilver, which has ceramic particles in it. It does not burn out, but it's very solid, and you can make molds off of them. But this is really the quest. I mean, it's like most people really don't need the kind of surface resolution that I'm looking for and really craving and really keep pushing and trying. But the machines over the years have come to realize that these are demands that need to be met. And I mean, it's amazing. Like I said, you know, 3 or 4 years difference, and boom. So in 3 years, oh, be excited, because then they have laser centering in metal. Oh. This is sort of the process that we use. It comes off the growing machine. You sprue it standardly in a button. Ta-da. This was a little dragon with a really big diamond in it. It was amazing. And yeah, standard lost wax. You pour your investment, melt out the wax. We have a wonderful centrifugal casting machine. There it is. Now you get all the investment off of it. You polish all the detail off of it. You re-engrave. Oh, I thought we had a picture of it with the stone. Oh well. Then you re-engrave all the detail back into it. And there we go. And I have faith that one day we'll get to the point where we don't have to re-engrave it. But it's been amazing how seeing the pieces, I mean, it would take me like 3 or 4 minutes to finish something. I'd take a grinder, I'd go, I'd take a blue wheel, I'd go, I'd throw it in a tumbler, I'd sulfur it, I'd throw it under a wheel, and they were done. And that's how I finished things. Well, I came to a place where there are actually jewelers, and they were like, that's not how you do this. I don't know if poor Lise realized what she was getting into when she was like, oh, I'll finish his stuff. And then I kept going, well, can't you get that little line back in there? So, you know, there really is just something about a graved line and a surface that a cast line isn't. And yeah, the pieces have become much more dynamic now that I have a poor individual who's forced to deal with my obsessiveness with a cutting tool. These are sketches for the mermaid ring. My friend Paul works at ZBrush. He's one of the technical, I don't know, I don't even know what his position is really. Basically, he goes to conventions, he does some writing, but he basically is the interface between the industry and the company. And ZBrush is like one of the most amazing companies for response to their clients or whatever. And because they'll change the program to meet what they feel people are, asking for. Paul contacted me and asked if I would make a piece for a book that he just wrote. And so I was like, well, let's make something that incorporates a lot of the different techniques, but also is really dramatic. And so we have the piece here too. And so I was looking around the shop, we found this huge cabochon. I was like, I'm gonna use that. And these are initial sketches for it. This is the completed model. And then, yeah, from the side, the top. And then this is the part. This is a piece that we're about to produce. All of the planes are designed for, I say pave, I guess it's not pave because it's not everything, but so all of our planes are set for stone setting, and it's going to be a pseudo pave or bead set ring. There are lots of inserts. Yeah, it's going to be a silly kind of showpiece thing that's going to be very cool when it's done. This is Shinya, one of my dearest friends, and yet again, another employee of Green Lake. It was his 11th wedding anniversary, and so this is the ring I made for his anniversary. And on the back, these are the kind of insets. That says Takahashi, and then on the back it's a gear set, so it's dual-sided. But you can see how, I really like little lines. This is a Kladow that I designed for a couple in Germany. And you can see the flats where we set stones in it. They really love the skull Kladow rings that I do, but she doesn't like skulls. So he got a skull one, and she was like, I like florally things. Well, that's octopus florally, I guess, Tend to go back to little tentacle things with repeating patterns. I don't know. And then we turned it into a pendant, pre-stone setting there. I fell into the knife industry. There's a lanyard bead culture in custom knives where people like little things hanging off the backs of their knives, and these are all sort of, we have examples of them here, are examples of the beads that I've been making for knife companies, and they're the zombie beads, yes. These are money clip tiles. We had a promotional, and we were trying to figure out something to send to editors of a magazine. And we were like, oh, we should make a pendant, we should make this. And I've been doing some work with William Henry Knife Company, and I was like, they make these money clips, and William Henry's been wanting me to design like a tile for the money clip. And I was like, well, why don't we use that? I mean, they'll send us the money clips. And these are where they screw into the, I have a wax of it here, where they screw into the front of the clip. They're done in sterling. It's a black clip, and so the sulfur, they blend in kind of nicely. Oh, there we go. This was a pendant that we did. They had a Hana tattoo. These were set rubies, and we then did this. And ZBrush allows you to actually make truly organic, hand-sculpted felt. I mean, you see the tool marks. It is digital sculpting. And it's really one of the few things that brings that kind of handcraft into this technology. And it's nice because it gives a shop or a person, an artist, the ability to generate something that's repeatable, that's scalable, but I'm a sculptor. I'm not a jeweler. And this is sculpting. I mean, I have a 21-inch Satique or a 24-inch Satique. It's pressure and angle sensitive. You go on the surface, you can go from fine to thick to fine. It is sculpting. You're just sculpting in a digital media. And that's what I was hunting for forever, and it finally happened. So here's the rendering, the grow, and then the final piece. And trying to do this in any other program becomes really difficult. I mean, is there anything else that you can think of that you'd be able to do that in? No, I can't. And so it really opens up a venue of creativity and artistry that the CAD sort of robbed. I mean, there was that time where everyone was doing CAD and it all looked alike, it all had sharp edges, it was all like, it looked like die punched. And we're getting to the point where we can actually create organic, handcrafted things that, once again, are repeatable, scalable, and, you know, it's just, I sit there every day doing this, and I'm like, this is the greatest thing in the world. These are lanyard beads that I did for William Henry. They have two lines, and they kind of go into the top and they hang down. But you can see how we decided on a base blank size, and off of that, you can do different designs and iterations incredibly quickly. And, you know, and I did this in an afternoon, you know, where when I did this by hand, it used to take me forever, because when I start putting little lines in it, they snap off. No, that doesn't happen anymore. Once again, beads. But here you can really see the finesse and detail that you can actually get out of it. And if you look at the bead, it's there. I mean, it's exciting stuff. Yes, my trademark clappy monkey. These are sunglasses that my friend Sampa von Cyborg is a performance artist and manufacturer in London. And he was like, I want to make sunglasses. And so this was sort of my prompt of sunglasses off of them. I think we have pictures of the prototype piece as well. Oh, speak of the devil. Now these are grown, and this is a hard resin. You can see how even here there's almost a furry surface. And when you start getting into the larger rapid prototyping, what you have is surface resolution that becomes a real issue. It's just the material isn't designed to have that kind of finesse. So what they do is they'll cast this in aluminum, they'll hand finish the aluminum piece, use that as the first fabrication blank, create fabrication molds off of the aluminum part, not this part. And that's where the jewelry industry has been really pushing, where you don't go through this phase, you go straight into your castable resins. This is a design for a ring. This is the band. I sculpted it out flat, we bent it, and it's just, that obviously is the back end, so it mirrors, it goes around. I've really been trying to develop a concept of three-dimensional scroll work, where you get, you know, that engraved feeling, but dimensional. And we have some wonderful engravers, so it's like, instead of me putting the lines, we've also done these where they're completely flat, and the engraver will go in and do engraved details on top of them. So you get like different feelings. And once again, digitally, you have different iterations that can happen quickly, and it just opens your fabrication process up dramatically. Industry, the quest for detail. A little hectic today. I actually had to pack my computer to send tomorrow to Chicago. This is magic. Next week, I'm going to Chicago to do what's called the Smart Show, the Smart Jewelry Show. And they have a CAD competition that's live CAD. And this year's going to be interesting. It's sort of sponsored by Matrix, and everyone's always used Matrix, and now I'm going in with ZBrush and Modo, and we'll see how that plays out. It'll be very interesting to see how that is. The trade show's magic. You have JCK. Basically, the industry is now actually coming around, and these shows are really the outlets for people to shop for these technologies. And it's really exciting seeing how an industry gloms onto a technology and really runs with it. We were talking earlier, the dental industry has been like the leader in the technology for the jewelry industry, because no one would have ever needed something fine and detailed until they started prototyping crowns. They can take off the x-rays, they're perfectly fit, And that was really the anchor for the technology for what we're doing now. I wanted to include this because I think that a lot of people don't realize some of their rights. This is probably my best-selling ring. It's a sugar skull, and it is knocked off constantly. There are lots of people knocking, Disney's even pseudo-knocking me off now. Your rights as an artist are actually very powerful now. Because of Napster and that whole music abortion, and everyone was freaking out, and well, they rewrote the laws where all you have to do is prove providence. So, like, I have like 13, 14 different iterations of this file, and they're dated, over the years. And all I have to do, like when I see them on eBay, I call eBay, I go, look, I have provenance on this part, can you please remove them? And they'll remove them, and Etsy has removals and stuff. But you literally, as an artist, have tons of power now as, everyone's like, oh, you gotta get a copyright, oh, you gotta, you really don't. You just have to document your work. And that's another beautiful thing about digital files is that I have an entire history, I have terabytes of files, and there are thousands of iterations of different things. But even if you don't do digital, if you're doing handcrafted pieces, all you have to do is, how many people have heard of the Writers Guild, the WGA? Now, do you know about their intellectual property program? Okay, WGA online, if you have something that you want, that you feel is your art, that you want to put out there and you're scared of getting knocked off, go to WGA.com. You now can do it digitally. All you have to do is take pictures of it, write a description, and send them $25 and they'll file it. The beautiful thing is if you feel someone has infringed on your copyright, they have lawyers and they'll sue. So it's a real important tool if you are trying to sell work, if you're trying to get it out there and you're scared. Now, the problem is there's nothing you can do. I mean, this is made in Thailand. And you're never going to find them. The person who does this iteration is kind of funny. He also knocks off Harley Davidson rings. He knocks off a lot of big companies. And Harley has been looking for him for years. And they literally have a mobile casting facility that they put up in a building and then they run. And so, you know what? You're not going to catch him. And, look at it. I'm not too stressed about it. If you want to spend $70 on a ring, you're not going to buy my ring anyway. And just keep ahead of the design curve. I'll show a Disney picture next, and I'll talk just a hair about how styles work. But you can tell that this is a direct copy of my ring, just poorly done. And the real design feature in it is that this pattern is actually a lotus pattern. So it's actually an Indian motif. There's not a Mexican sugar skull on the planet that anyone's going to ever look up a reference and find it. It's like, nope, you found it here. And it's obvious, you have flower, S-curl, swerve, flower, S-curl, swerve. It's a direct knockoff. Now, the funny part of this ring is that the back is smooth because I think this is the only picture they found. So they don't know what the back of the ring looks like. But you can tell what their reference image was. Now, this is Disney's version of it, and I can break down patterns and show you, but they've changed it enough to where, well, one, you don't ever want to sue Disney, you will lose. But they're smarter. They were like, oh, well, we have like a sort of motif, and then we patterned it off, and they were like, oh, we'll just do it all with flowers. So don't sue that one. You're not going to win. This is a version of it, and then this is the wonderful knockoff by a completely different person, but you can see the lotus repetition there, and I have him yanked off of Etsy and eBay all the time. But once again, it's a $40, $60 skull ring. This is the ZBrush magazine that has the tutorials for the mermaid ring, which is up here, and and this will run for a half hour. But this is sort of the process of building the mermaid ring. Any questions? I forgot to say, you could have asked me questions during the process. Sorry about that.
I have a question. Can you explain the process between the CAD to the equipment and what you get out of that? Because it looks like something there, then you make a casting off of that. And
Sure.
how to walk us through that?
Yeah. I use ZBrush. So as I come out of ZBrush, I decimate the file. So I take it down to a usable size. And then I export it as an STL, which is a stereolithography file. Now, I don't know any rapid prototyping machine that doesn't use STLs. It's a universal, I mean, they'll either ask you for OBJs or STLs. And any rapid prototyper on this planet should be able to use an STL. It's sort of like JPEGs. It's become like the universal outlet. You load that into either your milling machine. Your milling machine, well, I use a Revo from GymVision. So I take it into GymVision, and it builds milling paths. Those milling paths then are imported into their mill. It's a, but there are other milling processes that'll take that STL and build its native, milling paths.
Basically, you have to send it to some sort of program that tells the mill how to move.
The mill has to have milling paths built. Now, the rapid prototyping machines don't. It interprets the STL and builds its own growing paths. And so it then in turn builds these. And that's off the growing machine. And then these are resins that can be burned out. So you can sprue this and use it as a wax. This, on the other hand, is a much higher detailed, they come off the same machine. It's a much higher detailed product, but you have to make a mold of this, like a standard silicone mold. You then pull this out, inject wax, and then you go to that. And out of the injected wax, you sprue it, and then go through your standard loss wax. Now, they do have rapid prototype machines now called laser sintering machines, and they have like a very fine powder of metal, and instead of it, they all function pretty much like printers, so you're doing it layer by layer by layer, and some grow it down, some grow it up, but you're building it micron by micron, or 10 micron or 15 micron, depending on your surface resolution. And so the laser sintering is doing the same process. It's doing either in a gelatin format or a powder format, and they're going straight to metal. 10 years, it's going to be amazing. Right now, you wind up with something that looks like it's been sand cast. It's very rough surfacing. Yeah. Pick 100 and photo silver. Yeah, and they're both for the Envision Tech machine.
And there are many more rapid prototyping.
There are a number of companies that produce them. Envision Tech right now is one of the industry standards. It's cheap to run and upkeep compared to some of the others. The what's the T70? SolidScape. SolidScape has some of the best surface resolution, like the actual detail you get out of them is very high. Problem is they're very brittle models, and like I usually have to grow 3 or 4 of them so I can get one that doesn't blow out in the finishing and cleanup. But really those are the 2 major anchors. There's now a machine, who makes digital wax? But is digital wax DWS name. Okay. DWS makes a product called digital wax, which burns out very well. And if you're very persnickety with the machine and really know how to sprue it right, they produce beautiful models. But it's really tricky because a lot of it, when you're growing, your angle of the detail is very important. So like if you have something like this, like if it's growing and it's not sprued, it'll hit this and this we'll start growing it, right? But there's nothing floating it, so this becomes this floating island out here. So some machines are much more, like if it's one of the fluid machines as opposed to a solid machine, the solid powders and stuff, you wind up with float, so you really have to go through and look at this thing, and any part that's hanging down just a hair, if it's not connected in some format or another, the grow will fail. It'll turn into, you'll just get these weird flat planes in them, or just parts will be gone, or, you know. They did it for years. I came in and said, well, you can grow that. Sculptor, jeweler. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and we probably go through on, I probably have 3 or 4 fails in a grow or of a design where I have to go back and fiddle it, or he has to sprue it differently. So it's a really kind of persnickety process that you have to pay a lot of, well, big round rings are easy. You know, I happen to have things that do this a lot. And, you know, it's like, oh, well, we got to sprue that one. And, you know, it's like, tilt it 3 degrees and you've just changed the entire grow. So a lot of it is having someone who is very familiar with the grow process, and that takes experience. I mean, Green Lake Jewelry. Yeah. Yes.
So, when you make these, you make them for the size of the client's finger, or
Yes.
you make a size up or down there?
Oh man, okay. Do I make them to scale, or do we size them? If it has stones, like the skull rings, you just scale it. I just made one, it's relative scale. That was the other thing, ZBrush has no scale. It's a pixel or something. It's like no scale in ZBrush. So I have to dump it back out to Modo, which has scale, and I can make the stones, make the sizes. So if there's stones involved, yeah, you have to make it to that size, or I'm supposed to, but I'm not good at that either. I like this. They're like, what's that made for? I don't know, something round, man. Yeah, we have rings that are like for 6 carat stones. It's like, okay, I guess I should change that. So, yeah, if it's stone oriented, you have to make it to scale. But the nice thing is Modo has some fall off features where you can make this oval, so at the outside of the circle it doesn't change size, but on the inside it does. And if it's not a dramatic change, like 1 or 2 sizes, you can freeze the size of the head and just stretch it out. And then there's a thing called Go Z, which allows ZBrush and Modo to talk. And you dump it back into this program, it realizes it's changed, and it asks you, oh, do you want me to reproject the surface detail that was on the last one to this new shape? You go, yeah, and it goes, it's magic. Yay, technology.
Are you mostly designing like as you go, or are you drawing anything else?
I, every once in a while, will do a sketch. Oh, sorry. We discussed this earlier, too. And I even knew her question before she said it. Do I start with sketches, or do I meander? I think is. I meander most of the time. Once again, like if there are stones or something, I might lay something out, but I'm a sculptor. That's how I think, it's how I see things. And so I tend to do some rough sketches there's a feature called digital wax, which allows you to just pull the meshes, and then you do that and it remeshes itself. So you don't get mesh distortions, which is if you're thinking of something square and it's like, oh, I want to pull this out, those squares all of a sudden stretch and you get stretched out geometry. Well, ZBrush made this beautiful thing. You go like this and it remeshes it completely. So as you're sculpting, you can pull, push, twist, bend, poke it back in. So it's a very fast process. And so a lot of times I'll play with shape that way because I strive for like this rhythm and weight is sort of this thin, thick, thin. And so that's really the shapes that I'm hunting for. So I'll do something like that. And then I don't even use it as a base. I'll have that in my brain. I'll start to do the rough block out to those rough areas and then take it into ZBrush and sculpt away. And it's funny, if you paid attention, it goes back, oh, and then I undo it. And then it goes, oh, and then I undo it. I do a lot of, I'm not the most efficient worker. No. Yes. Do I use a stylus? Yeah, there's a product that Wacom produces that's called a Cintiq, and it is a stylus pad, but it's a monitor. So I'm actually sculpting on the screen. So like you see my tool here, that's actually where my stylus is on the screen. So it's literally right here. And ZBrush is angle and pressure sensitive. So you can take it, start soft, press hard, go like this, and you get a line that's gone like this, it cuts under this way. So it's a very finesseful interface.
And can you explain that between Moto and you draw in Moto?
I always start in Moto because of how I generate geometry. And yeah, I do a rough block out, and it's usually rough. I mean, right, exactly. Because I have preset ring sizes, you just go like that, you inflate it, you punch a hole in it, and you get roughly where you want things to be. And for more complicated shape, as you saw earlier, you know, we have the rough shape, but I don't worry about detail too much at that point. It is just purely getting the geometry where I need it. And like I know that in the face area, so I'll subdivide that once. So as I'm breaking it down, now that's 4, it's 8, and this is only 4, and this is, you know, it has twice the geometry as you break it out. So it's a little planning on where you think there'll be detail and such. And the nice thing about the Go Z thing is if I don't have enough geometry in it, I push Go Z, it dumps it back into Moto, but it takes it all the way back down to its base geometry. I can change it there and then kick it back out, and you can completely change and readjust the geometry. And ZBrush is not a great program to start things in. It really is sort of a finishing program, but now with the digital wax and stuff, you really can't start to generate shapes, but your geometry's squirrely. And start in Moto. Yeah.
So, where are people teaching around here, or is it just shallow?
Well, I mean, this is,
I mean,
where,
in general, even
yeah,
the process.
sure. Where are they teaching the process? Honestly, there really aren't a lot of people teaching the ZBrush process. Because it was really a feature film software, it was really designed for people who knew what they were doing to come in, and it was a finesse tool. Now, there's a group called Gnomon Workshop, and they produce lots of tutorials that are great. And they have industry, it's all in LA, they have industry professionals, and they're very good. There is very good documentation on ZBrush alone. Now, the ZBrush Moto stuff, actually, that's why I was featured in Paul's book. That's really one of the first times that jewelry has been discussed as a process in any of the education, because still, most of the educational stuff is targeted towards character design or environmental, you know, it's still very heavily the gaming and video or gaming and movie industry that use the software. Now, as far as Matrix and the other software packet, is there any place?
Well, we have a school of art in Philadelphia, and I know I've been to.
Well, GIA has a big CAD program. Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of a newish thing.
You do a lot of tutorials online too.
Yeah, there are lots of tutorials online, and
That like you pay for live.
yeah, and ZBrush Central, which is sort of the forums for ZBrush, they have now called ZBrush Workshop, so they have tons of tutorials that people produce. and just put up. I mean, there's lots of education online. And you just do more intense queries and you'll get what you want. If you ever need to know anything, just give me a yell. I send a lot of little videos to a lot of people. I mean, whenever I post on ZBrush, I usually get, for about 4 weeks, 100 to 150 emails a day of people going, how do you do that? So, and luckily, you can usually say, oh, well, here, I made this video for that guy, so here, take that, you know. But it's an interesting community because the software company is very supportive to its community. So in turn, the community winds up being very supportive back. It's like an $800 program. All upgrades are free forever. You know, it's like, and they changed the program to do what you want it to do. So that in turn builds very good community. And there's some brilliant people who are part of it. So it's cool. Yeah.
Software able to estimate the mass of the species in certain silver, gold, by calculating volume or something?
Does the software help you calculate volumes per metal?
So you can figure out how much it's going to weigh, because
Right.
some of these are massive.
Oh, yeah. And, well, ZBrush does not. But Matrix, which is another one of the pieces that I use in the software, it takes the mesh, it evaluates volume, and estimates volume by atomic weight of the metal. So it'll tell you exactly what the volume is. Matrix will.
It'll tell you the size 9 and weight.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you want to get it for a different size, then you do have to scale it.
You do change it. It doesn't give you a list of size. You actually have to make the piece that size, but yeah. Yeah.
Has working with them around jewelers changed the way that you sculpt the outcome of your art?
Has working with jewelers changed the way that I sculpt? Yeah, because, you know, I make things that are 0.5 millimeter wide, and, you know, it's like this, and they're like, that wall will never do anything. It'll turn into a piece of foil and fall off, and I'm like, oh, come on, try it. And they handed me things, say, look, idiot, it fell off. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, I am one of those people, I need to see it, though, because I hear a lot of people telling me I can't do things that we actually wound up doing. But, no. Very supportive. But, yeah, it's completely, you know, I knew nothing about prong heights or widths. I mean, I'm a sculptor, and I just started making jewelry objects, and that's why most of my early stuff they were sculptural objects. There was not stones in them, there wasn't. And even then, I was working with Casting House at the time, and they're like, oh, well, that's not going to work. And it's really funny. The things they said wouldn't work, worked, and the things they thought would be easy weren't. But, you know, you work with the people who are fabricating them, and yeah, it's changed how I view fabricatability incredibly. Yeah. Software costs to do what I'm doing now, to be able to create on this. Moto, new is about $1,200. And the upgrades are about, what I said, this one, like 500? Yeah. Upgrades about 500. They upgrade once a year and a half, something like that. ZBrush, 800. You never pay for an upgrade. It's that. Now, I also use Matrix, and how much is Matrix? $7,000 now, yeah. So, as you can see, trying to get Moto to develop more jewelry tools. But Matrix provides things that are completely invaluable. Everyone thinks I hate Matrix. It's not true. It's just, I like to create organic things, and it's not really good at that. Even though now they've done plugins which actually allow you to be much more organic in your creation, but Matrix is really targeted towards jewelry. So it does stone layout for you. I mean, it'll calculate pavé and metal weights and all of that. So it really is a self-sustained jewelry package. And if you're not doing hyper-organic work, it works for, I mean, it is the industry standard piece of software. It's expensive. But Magic, which is a decimation software and builds tools That's $32,000 at an entry-level buy-in. So that makes you think Matrix is really cheap. It depends. Like, you really could just use Modo and Matrix and make objects if I have stone sizes that I've built, so I have my carrots. I have ring sizes that I built you can build a base set of tools to be able to generate products. But if you're really running a jewelry shop and you really need a tool that's really going to help you create objects, it's a fabulous tool. But $7,000. Oh, I forgot this. Yeah, the Cintiq. I think you can get a 21-inch Cintiq for like $1,200. Yeah, and then I have one at home, which is a 24-inch high def. That's $2,700. And okay, to be fair, I just spent $8,000 on a computer. But we're using, yeah. Yeah, so now, so let's see. That's added up to 8, 7, yeah.
$20,000.
Not as much as a wax pen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But once again, I abuse computers. I mean, there are people who, the computer I have at home right now is probably a $1,000 computer with RAM upgrades, so, with probably in a new video card, so probably $1,500 for that computer. And honestly, if you don't mind waiting around, it's fine. There's, the blue screen of death. Well, ZBrush gives you the gray screen of wait a lot, where you're like, and it's like, I'm using every resource in the world, just step away from the machine for a while. And, it's like, everyone's like, oh, you meander around the shop a lot, Tom. And it's like, well, it's gray, And I'm a button clicker, so I'm like, and it's like, ah. So, $8,000 computer. Hopefully that won't happen. If it does, I'm going to be so upset. Yeah. ZBrush has some very powerful projection tools, which most other programs could only dream of. Matrix has this thing called Matrix Art, and it's abysmal. I mean, what you wind up getting is this thing that looks like white noise, three-dimensional, and yeah. But ZBrush has tools that are projection tools, so you literally, what I did with the scales, I literally sculpted a scale, and you can take a photo of it, and it'll turn it into alpha material. So it'll take a three-dimensional object and turn it into alpha material. Alphas, if we don't know, alphas are height maps that are based on tone. And you can try to do you think you can do it like a black and white image, but no, it really is, this is 0, this is 10, and it categorizes everything. So like if you try to take a photo of someone and use it to create three-dimensional imagery, for the most part, what you'll wind up with is like eyelashes and stuff are black, so they go deep. So you wind up with wrong bit height. But ZBrush it's a grab dock feature, and you can actually sculpt objects, turn it into an alpha, and then use that as a repeating pattern. You can create repeating tiles, and now they have a thing called noise maker, and as long as you have a tile that repeats, you push click, and it covers the object in it, and it's amazing how good it is. So in that way, there are very few things that take three-dimensional objects and turn it into alpha information, and having it just be a one-button click allows you to do repeatable patterns like tiles and chainmail and anything that repeats. It's just a snap, as opposed to going into Photoshop, trying to figure it out. You rub it down a little, you come back, oh, it has bumps. You're like, ah. So, yeah, that's a fantastic feature of the program. Thank you. And you can come look at things.